The rain fell in uneven sheets, painting the city streets in shades of gray. The air was damp and carried the metallic tang of a storm lingering just on the horizon. Beneath a flickering streetlight, a man huddled inside a threadbare coat, his shoulders slouched against the cold. His name was Marcus, a man whose life had once been filled with promise but had taken a cruel turn, leaving him on these unforgiving streets. Marcus stared at the passing cars, their headlights slicing through the night, illuminating his face just long enough to reveal the weight he carried. Tired eyes, hollow cheeks, and the faint trace of a tear frozen on his skin. His fingers clutched a crumpled sign that read, "Veteran. Homeless. Please help." Yet, for hours, no one had stopped. The world seemed indifferent to his existence. People rushed by, umbrellas shielding them from the rain but also from Marcus's silent plea. The city buzzed with life, a distant laughter, the rhythmic click of heels on wet pavement, but it all felt like a cruel reminder of what he had lost. Just as the rain began to ease, Marcus caught sight of a convoy of sleek black cars pulling to a stop at the cafe across the street. Through the tinted windows, he glimpsed a familiar figure stepping out. A man he had seen countless times on television. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he realized who it was: Barack Obama. In that instant, a flicker of hope reignited within him. Clutching his sign tightly, Marcus gathered his courage and made his way across the street, his breath clouding in the cool air. Little did he know, this moment would change everything. As Marcus approached the cafe, his mind raced. What would he even say? His hands trembled slightly, a mix of cold and nerves. This wasn't just any man. This was Barack Obama, a figure of hope and change for millions. But Marcus wasn't thinking about politics or speeches. All he saw was a man who had the power to listen. Maybe, just maybe, he'd care enough to help. He hesitated near the curb, letting the wet cardboard sign slip from his fingers. Doubts crept in. What if he brushes me off like everyone else? What if he doesn't even notice me? But the weight of years spent surviving on the streets pushed him forward. He didn't have much left to lose. Inside the cafe, a small crowd had already gathered, their phones flashing as they snapped photos of Obama speaking with the staff. Marcus stood outside, his reflection merging with the glass, observing the scene like an outsider peering into a different world. "Hey buddy, you okay?" A voice startled him. Marcus turned to see a young man in a delivery uniform, holding a bag of steaming coffee cups. His name tag read Luis. Marcus nodded quickly, brushing off the concern. But Luis lingered. "I see you out here a lot. Need something warm?" He offered Marcus a cup from the bag. "Thanks," Marcus mumbled, the warmth of the cup stinging his cold fingers. Luis glanced at the commotion inside. "Big day in there. Must be something important." Marcus looked down, ashamed. "Important people don't care about guys like me." Luis frowned. "You don't know that. What if this one does?" The words lingered in Marcus's mind as Luis disappeared into the cafe. A few minutes later, the cafe door opened, and Obama stepped outside. He glanced briefly around the street, seemingly lost in thought. This was Marcus's chance. Summoning every ounce of courage, he stepped forward, his voice shaking but firm. "Mr. President," he called out. Obama turned, his expression softening as his eyes landed on Marcus. "Yes?" And in that moment, Marcus stood at the crossroads of despair and hope, unaware that this encounter would ignite a chain of events neither of them could have foreseen. Marcus froze under Obama's gaze. Words tumbled in his mind like loose stones, but none seemed right. Would this be his only chance? He swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. "I need help," he said, his voice barely louder than the fading rain. Obama stepped closer, his Secret Service detail instinctively moving with him. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone warm but measured, as though sensing the gravity of the moment. "Marcus," he replied, his voice cracking. "I'm a veteran. Served 2 tours. But when I came back," he paused, his throat tightening. "It all fell apart. I lost my family, my home. I just need, I don't know, something. Obama's expression softened, his eyes searching Marcus's face. Thank you for your service, he said earnestly. What branch? Army, Marcus answered, his posture unconsciously straightening. Before Marcus could say more, a bystander interrupted, snapping a photo and calling out, Mr. President, over here. The moment felt fragile, like a thread about to snap. Obama raised a hand to acknowledge the crowd but turned his full attention back to Marcus. Let's step aside, Obama said, gesturing toward a quieter spot under the cafe awning. Tell me more. Marcus hesitated, glancing at the Secret Service agents who hovered nearby. It's just, things haven't been right since I got back, he admitted, his voice wavering. I tried the VA, but the waiting lists are long and the programs, he trailed off, shaking his head. Obama nodded, his expression thoughtful. It shouldn't be like that, he said quietly. Marcus felt the first flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, belief that someone was truly listening. But then, as if the universe conspired to test him, a man in the cafe doorway muttered loudly, Why is he wasting his time? Everyone's got problems. The words hit Marcus like a punch. He turned away, his shoulders sagging. Maybe this had been a mistake. Hey, Obama's voice broke through the noise, firm yet kind. Don't let that get to you. He placed a hand on Marcus's arm, steadying him. What you're facing is real, and it matters. The kindness in his voice brought tears to Marcus's eyes. I don't even know why I thought you'd care, Marcus admitted, the vulnerability spilling out. Obama straightened, his gaze unwavering. Because sometimes, you just need one person to care, he said. And I do. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. It wasn't a solution, not yet, but it was something. And something was enough to hold on to. As the rain began to pick up again, Obama turned to one of his aides. Let's get his information, he instructed. We'll see what we can do. Marcus blinked in disbelief. The moment felt surreal, as though it belonged to someone else. But as Obama shook his hand, he realized it was real. The first step of something greater had just begun. The rain came down harder as Marcus stood near the cafe's awning, his breath visible in the cold air. The world around him felt both chaotic and still, a surreal mix of the ordinary and the extraordinary. Obama's aide had stepped aside to make a call, leaving Marcus with a moment to process what was happening. I don't deserve this, Marcus muttered under his breath, the years of self-doubt clawing their way to the surface. Obama, who had been quietly watching him, stepped closer. Marcus, let me tell you something, he said, his voice steady and firm. The hardest battles we fight aren't always on the battlefield. Sometimes they're the ones inside us. And you've been fighting that battle every single day. That makes you deserving. The words hit Marcus like a floodgate bursting open. His knees buckled slightly, and for a moment he felt weightless, not from despair but from the overwhelming sense of being seen, of being valued. Obama extended his hand again, this time not as a politician or a figure of authority, but as one human being to another. You don't have to carry it alone anymore, he said. Marcus hesitated, his hand trembling as he reached out. But when their hands clasped, something shifted within him, a spark of hope that had been buried under years of loss and loneliness. The cafe door opened, and Obama's aide returned, nodding to the former president. We've connected with some people who can help, he said. You're not going to be alone in this, Marcus. Tears streamed down Marcus's face, blending with the rain. For the first time in years, he felt something he'd thought was lost forever, the belief that change was possible. This was the moment his life began again. Weeks later, Marcus sat on a park bench, watching the world pass by. The biting cold was still there, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel so harsh. In his hands, he held a brochure from a local veterans outreach center, a place Obama's team had connected him with. He had already started attending counseling sessions and was working towards securing stable housing. The journey ahead was daunting, but Marcus felt a flicker of hope with every small step he took. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a handwritten note from Obama himself, delivered after their encounter. Marcus, never forget that your story matters. Your strength inspires others, even when you can't see it yourself. Keep moving forward. You're not alone. Marcus ran his fingers over the words, a small smile breaking across his face. For years, he had been invisible, but now he carried proof that someone, somewhere, had seen him and believed in him. Nearby, a mother and her child were laughing as they fed ducks in the pond. The sound filled the air, light and joyful, a stark contrast to the silence Marcus had known for so long. He stood, tucking the note back into his pocket. The world still felt overwhelming, but it also felt open, full of possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to dream of before. As he walked away, Marcus glanced over his shoulder at the park, the ducks, and the people. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the world around him. It wasn't just a new chapter. It was the beginning of a whole new story.